All right. All right. We're gonna talk about this map for a little bit. We're gonna talk about this map because these drafts are weird for this map. They just are. These drafts are weird. BOE has the single strongest objective of any single map. If you win the objective on BOE every single time, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the game. 100% of the time. You're pretty much guaranteed to win the game. If your comp wins the race, you should always race. If your comp does not win the race, then you're forced to defend, even though defending is painful. Because if you lose the defense, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Not only because you've lost the defense, but the Immortal is a ranged hero as long as it has shields. The Immortal has shields equal to the amount of the remaining shield. Right? And every time it uses its ranged attacks, it loses a little bit of its shield until it slowly becomes a melee hero. But a full shield, a normal Immortal will only get maybe a 4-wall, the first one. Right? A full shield of first Immortal will get a fort. A full shield first Immortal with a Sylvanas can sometimes get a keep. Having a shield makes a big difference, which is why it's usually better to also draft a racing comp and race, even if you're going to lose the race, just because you're going to have that flexibility of you're going to make sure that the shield isn't so big. But here's a game where it was kind of lost in the draft, right? Yeah. See, it happens. If everyone's reading chat, read KR's story. 6 minute, 3-second game on BOE because of Sylvanas. One with First Immortal. It happens. Blue loses the race. Blue has no choice but to defend. Red should always be attacking. They have Tychus, who did good consistent damage. They have Mark from Tyrande. They have Lunara, who's going to be good and then going to be crazy because of Nature's Culling at 7. And they have Greymane, who is the second highest damage hero on the Immortal, period. The first one's Butcher, for the record. Butcher actually does more damage to the Immortal than Greymane does, but Butcher has other problems. Which is why he's never drafted. Whereas Greymane is just a good hero who also happens to win the race. So at no point should Red Team be defending the Immortal, right? They should always be trying to race. They should also just be trying to race because their team fight's really bad. Double tank, Muradin plus Johanna have a really beefy front line. They have blinds that are going to mitigate a lot of the Tychus and the Greymane and the Lunara damage. The risk here is poke. Because Li Ming is a hero that blue team has, it's possible to defend the Immortal purely via poking, and as soon as someone gets out of position or is low, then you can go in and get a kill and start snowballing fights because of Li Ming. So what red team should do is race the Immortal, and if the enemy team ever comes, just leave. And if they ever start DPSing their Immortal, go back in. Because if someone's DPSing their Immortal and they can see the health bar move, then they know it's a 5v4. And you can win a 5v4 even if your comp is not great. Right? So the correct decision is to always raise the Immortal. That is the correct decision for the map and for the comp that got drafted.
The battle begins.
Apparently Yuge is a little tilted.
10 seconds.
So, in my opinion, there's no reason that Red should ever lose this game. Ever lose this game. Let me catch one chat. I know a whole lot of Grandmasters, people who have been GM since season started, basically, and they're all falling out of GM now and keep saying something is broken in a recent patch with matchmaking and that game rewards for having lower MR in the higher divisions. Your thoughts? I don't know. Because it's based on hero points and not necessarily directly on MMR, if you're the first person to achieve GM because you played a lot of games, you're going to get knocked out of GM by people who are playing more games now and have a higher win rate. I don't think anything broke in the patch. I just think that's the natural way ladders work. I should make a playlist of my poems. That's true. Yeah, no one on their team has to hard engage. Tygus can get away with Shrug It Off. Tyrael has a teleport. Tehran's the only one who's vulnerable, but she doesn't need to be anywhere near the front. Lunara is fine. Greymane can easily get away. Tygus or Lunara should probably be the solo laner here. Leave the other 4 in the top lane. Muradin or Joe should be the solo laner for blue. Kind of awkward. I would let Joe do it, because Muradin has more kill potential in the 4v4. Looks like you're going to let Joe do it. That's fine. Muradin's being a bruiser with Perfect Storm. I like that decision. Even though it is versus a Greymane and a Tychus, where Reaper would have been really good. I actually owe you guys a poem. I currently have 1251 followers, so that happened like yesterday. I have not yet recited the 1250 poem, but I recited the 1200 one. Unfortunately, I made the boneheaded mistake of not highlighting a lot of the older poems, and those Twitch VODs are gone because they expire. So we're actually missing a lot of poems. If you didn't see them live, you're just never going to see them. I'll probably re-recite them at some point just so I can put them on YouTube. So we have Tyrael versus Joe in... So this is basically a triple range comp. Greymane's half a range, Lunara and Tychus are both ranged. They only have one tank. Your tank should never be your solo laner, because you need your tank to prevent you from dying and to just peel for you and do general things. This 4-man is really dumb. Like, really dumb. This is something that should literally never happen, ever. Alright, let me rechat. But with the way the game tries to even out MMRs, if someone has a super high 4K MMR, he's going to get on a team with a bunch of low MMR masters or GMs who aren't great, potentially versus a team of mid MMR better players. Yeah, that's true. It used to be worse. It used to be that you could have bronze or silver players in your game. They've actually significantly improved the disparity in matchmaking at very, very high levels. But it's always going to be hard to find good matches at very high levels. It's just because of the bell curve, just because of the population of the game. The game would need to, like, quintuple in population for games at a high level to be consistent. I'm actually confident in this particular area that Blizzard has done all they can, because they don't have the games where you have, like, a 2k MMR player balancing out a 4k MMR player anymore. Also, HOTS is a very team-focused game, and if you don't feel like playing as a team, even if you're the best player in the game, like Huge, you're going to lose. If Huge was communicating and not tilted... Well, yeah. If you're... Yeah, that's true. That's the way it is. Alright. Alright, we should actually talk about this. So we're going to talk about carrying. We're going to talk about carrying and the way you carry in HOTS. There's two ways of winning in HOTS. One is like the macro one, where you just dominate the map. And one is the micro one, where you kind of win all the team fights. That's how you win the game. Both of those actually require a lot of teamwork. If you're going for a macro strategy, let's use Cursed Hollow as an example. If everyone's at the tribute and you're split pushing, your team needs to delay the tribute. You don't want to win the tribute. You just want to delay it for as long as possible to get that value, right? That's a strategy. In order to win at HOTS, your team needs to decide on a strategy and then execute the strategy. That's how that works. There are certain heroes that are really good at forcing execution of a strategy. If you have a hard engage comp, Falstad is really good at forcing those engages for you. One of the reasons Nostromi always picks Falstad, for the record. Plus, he can split soak, right? So you can make sure your team never falls behind. You can never get further than 2 levels behind. You're soaking all the lanes. Falstad with a global can always soak. If you're a really good player, you're going to be aware of those strategies. And if a lot of the time you're going to be paired with people who only have mechanics. Who only have mechanics and don't understand the maps, don't understand the strategy of the game. And you're going to carry those people with your decision making. Right? But in order to do that, you have to communicate. So one of the major things that I see people not do in Hero League ever is A, talk about the strategy for the comp, or B, use pings. You need to communicate in team-focused games. One of the reasons that everyone wants comms so badly to be built in is because you kind of need them. I'm actually started to just like link my Discord every time I get into a Hero League game and people want to hop on. It's great. There are 7 globals in the game, I think, for the record. But 3 of them are heroics. The way to make yourself easy to carry in this game is to identify who the best strategic player on your team is and listen to them. Right. Well, we're not seeing pings here either. And we're not seeing... Like, Yuge knows this is a bad decision. I guarantee you Yuge as a player knows that he should not be solo laning versus the Johanna. And that it should be literally anyone else on his team. Literally anyone else on his team except the Tyrande. So there's 3 other options. And he's not saying anything. Yeah, never assume anything's obvious. That's actually true, Nick. Saray for a long time had the highest MMR and ladder, and no one would offer him invites to pro teams. Granted, no one was doing roster apocalypse back then either, but he didn't get invited to teams that were forming either, which is really weird. Don't spread the chain bomb, you fools! That would have been a kill if he had grenade range. Chunking out the Muradin. I'd like to point out that Tychus completely destroyed that Muradin, and everyone else was focusing everyone else. Like, the Lunara was on the KT. That's why the KT's chunked out. And the Greymane was, like, on the Li Ming. Everyone would just focus the Muradin would be dead. Whenever you have a Tychus on your team, focus the tank. Alright. So this is gonna hurt. This should be a race. Greymane should instantly be on top of this. Tyrande should rotate and you know, get the mark off. Should instantly be a race. Li Ming is doing the right thing. Li Ming has to poke. Johanna offers nothing in terms of racing, so she's just trying to delay. She gets the condemn, she gets the blinds. As soon as all 5 of them are here, they need to leave. Right? You don't ever want to fight under the Immortal 5v5 because of the stuns from the Immortal. They're 2-second warm-up. There's 2 seconds stuns. So if you get hit by them versus a coordinated team, you're just going to die. Particularly if you get hit by them versus a Li Ming. The Li Ming will just combo you and you die. And so what they're trying to do here is they're just trying to force the transition. Tychus should be DPSing the Immortal there. He actually could have been in range and then used his dash to get out. It's a small thing, but if you can force the transition, it's really, really matters. The grenade almost does it. I think the grenade actually missed, though. So here's a funny thing. It doesn't... Because the Immortal has stuns, because the Immortal is so strong with those stuns, you don't actually need to defend it as 5. Particularly if you know someone is chunked and had to back, and they did chunk out the Lunara, and the Lunara was out of mana, so they knew she was going to back. Johanna saw that and made the decision to go down and soak. Not enough people soak during the Immortal phase when they're at a standstill. If you have wave clear and you're on BOE and the Immortal phase is at a standstill, you should be soaking. There's no reason to just walk back and forth. But if you see someone go to soak, make sure you don't engage without them. Huge spreading chain bomb. Does get out though. Transition finally forced. So Huge made the decision that he saw the Johanna soaking and he wanted to go in. It's the right decision. And this is the right decision. They're just racing. Muradin soaking here is a mistake. Muradin actually has reasonable DPS on the Immortal. Muradin should not be the person soaking here. Particularly if he's going Sledgehammer. Alright. Sledgehammer is a really good talent on this map, especially if you're a secondary tank, which he is in this case. But he shouldn't have been soaking. He should have been racing the Immortal. Not having a huge shield matters. Not having a huge shield matters. We talked about this at the beginning, but that shield could have been a lot smaller if Muradin had focused the Immortal instead of going to Split Soak. Dude, Emma Paladin's a good player. Like, mechanically, he's a really strong player. He just doesn't understand crafting. Because he plays mostly quick match. Which is why he gets so frustrated early. Like, mechanically, he's fine. He just doesn't understand crafting. And as a result, he doesn't understand strategy. Because quick match does not make you learn those things. And he likes quick match. So for the record, unless you have a Sylvanas, you never want to push his 5. Someone needed to be top. So, again, could have been Tychus, could have been Greymane, could have been Lunara. Someone needed to be top. Unless you're post 10, you should always be soaking. Even then it can be debatable. And now they rotate up and get the soak, but like, they could be, this could be an 8. This could be an 8 right now. They could be like a full 2 levels ahead, or they'd be a level and a half. They could maybe be a level and a half ahead. At least a level and a quarter. And they just abandoned bottom. They could have, like, one person could have stayed here and just sat here until the wave showed up and gotten the soak. How do you move the time-seeking bar to the bottom left? I'll explain that. Actually, ask me after this game's over, and I'll tell you. Because I'm gonna have to link you something. So they traded camps. That's fine. Again, Tyrael is soaking. It is because of the Ali Ops interface. Yeah. But I was going to link it to you and explain that you had to go into settings and select it. If you want to Google it and figure it out on your own, that's cool too. Wraith is just clearing this camp. This is the right decision. This camp will push forever because the Bruiser, you can see it keeps respawning the dogs. So as soon as he saw the other team wasn't here, he's just like, okay, I'm going to clear this real quick. I know I can get away if they come. I'm going to have vision of them in time. I can just burn this down. We now see it being protected. Tehran could actually come heal it. Tehran could have healed it there. Made it a little bit more frustrating. Didn't. It's not a huge deal. It was already pretty low. So again, red team should be racing, blue team should be defending. Instead, they're just split up everywhere. This Lunara is constantly chunked. Like, every time I look at this Lunara, she's at half health. So Tychus, a little bit out of position, ends up getting, you know, killed. For the record, I would not take Piercing Bolt with this spec. Perfect Storm, Sledgehammer are fine on BoE, especially if you're a secondary tank, but I would never go Piercing Bolt. It's more valuable to have the Q up more often to burst people than it is to hit more than one person. again. I encourage you guys to look at my invisible line highlight, or go to my YouTube channel and look at the invisible line lecture. Lunara was way over the invisible line and died. Way over the invisible line. So again, there's a correct way to do this. If you're racing the Immortal, if the enemy team comes, you have to back off. Generally speaking, you want your tank to be zoning for you. So if Greymane, Lunara, and Tychus were all like right here, and Yuge was right here, and the enemy team was right here, this would be fine. In this comp, I would have taken Perfect Storm. Nah, honestly. If you stack it, it's a lot of damage. Focus on stacking the early game. Like, 11 is really bad. It's a 9-second cooldown. The early game, you should basically be spamming it. You should be getting 5 or 6 stacks a minute because you're constantly laning against people. So take away 2 minutes for the Immortal phase. That's 5 minutes. This should be at 5 times 5, 25 stacks. So he's at less than half of what a good player would have. There are ways of doing that. There are ways of implementing graphical effects in OBS Studio. I know people do it. I don't know how. If anyone's an expert on OBS Studio and would like to teach me, I am more than willing to learn. Massive 10v10 fight. Liming immediately gets erased. They don't need to win this. They already won this fight. They can just chase to the Immortal and then DPS the Immortal down. Be the right decision. Which is exactly what they end up doing. Sank comes down, doesn't matter. They need to run the Immortal. Lunara not on the Immortal is a big mistake here. Lunara just needs to be on the Immortal. Lunara constitutes all their poke damage. Okay. So we were talking about how Red Team doesn't have any poke damage, right? So if they're not winning the fight, then they have to poke the Immortal, and they can get out-poked because of Liming. Lunara has a great talent at 10 called Thornwood Vine that does nothing but poke. That's literally the purpose of the talent. It's her poke heroic as opposed to her, scary heroic. Her anti-dive heroic. Liming doesn't really have any dive. Liming's not a dive hero. Kael'thas isn't a dive hero. If Lunara had gone Leaping Strike, it would have removed the one thing her team... It would have given her team a resource they otherwise just straight up didn't have. And they could have won the Immortal they could have won the Immortal every single time as a result. They're still winning it, but Red Team is literally one bad fight from losing this game. Not even kidding. We do see Haymaker picked up. That's going to matter because of the isolation and because of the effect it has on Tyrael. If you can Haymaker a Tyrael as he's casting Sank to save his team, you just won the game. That was a good dodge. So this Immortal, the shields got burned down really, really fast. So this one isn't going to do as much damage as the first one, ironically, even though this is the second Immortal and it is actually stronger. It's going to do less damage overall. It might get... It's not even going to get the fort, I don't think. That's Astral. Greymane ends up going down. Ended up getting the fort, but they ended up trading 2 kills for it. That's actually even in terms of experience. Liming can teleport, Rhaegar has wolf form, Murden has jump, Janna has on-demand unstoppable. The only person who's really affected by slows in their comp is Kael'thas. So, there's a little bit of miscommunication there. Greymane and Tyrande, or Greymane at least went in really deep when Yuge didn't have Sanctification. Greymane can't go deep if Yuge doesn't have Sanct, because Tyrande can't keep a diving Greymane alive. But the point is, the poke matters. The poke matters a lot for winning the objective. And BOE has the strongest objective on the map. It's only a 2-lane map, so if you're ever behind, you can't just soak to come back. You actually do need to win the objective at some point in order to win the game. So by talenting to win team fights when your team is already winning the objective and the only thing they lack is poke and not taking poke when you have it as an option, it's just a mistake. Leaping Strike is probably the more fun talent in all cases, in my opinion. I played a lot with Leaping Strike and it's super fun. It's just not the right choice here. Leaping Strike does have a niche, a viable niche use. Once again, for some fucking retarded reason, uses the Split Soaker. This is really starting to make me angry. I can't even imagine how Yuge felt playing this game. So you do see Thunderstrike picked up. You're showing full damage burden. Like, full damage burden. With the exception of the fact that he would have done more damage if he'd taken battle momentum.
I fight for the glory of the high heavens.
Ancestral was late. Everything was a little overextended there, but only a little bit. He ended up going down. The Ancestral was a little bit too late. You really want to make sure you burn Ancestral sooner than that. And missed Ancestral, like a lot of people are like, oh, I need to save it, it's a heroic, it's a heroic, it's a heroic. You can never to guarantee that someone on your team doesn't die by burning Ancestral, just burn it. Most people save Ancestral for way too late. It should be going on someone when they're like half health at the most. Not the least, the most. It's a good saying. He's gonna die anyway. Lunara's gonna die. Trying to outplay, just feeding. So why did they fight that? Red team had forced the transition. They were up 5v4. All they had to do is back off and race. If they'd just backed off and raced, this Immortal phase would be over right now. Instead, they have 3 dead to 1. If your comp is the comp that wins the race, and you're ever ahead with an Immortal up, go race. Don't fight. This is another mistake. Joe should be the person zoning, Muradin should be the one DPSing. Sledgehammer is a useless talent if you're not on the Immortal. So, that's just a little bit of a swab. Wow. You can tell this is a Hero League game, because everyone's doing the wrong thing for their hero, but the right thing... Everyone's doing the wrong thing for their hero, but they're doing something that has to be done. That was a late saying. Actually could have saved Lunara. Although Lunara shouldn't have been that far forward anyway. This game hurts me. This like game legit hurts me. Tygus burning laser here just to DPS the Immortal down. This is actually reasonable. The enemy team should be focusing it ASAP. It does end up going down. That provided a good zoning, good distraction. I like that decision. They're gonna lose the fort here, and I think it's time to leave. Before the fort dies, they should just leave. Now the fort's dead. When you're guaranteed to lose a building, you need to fall back to your next line of defense before it actually ends up dying. No, you're post 10. Someone in blue could be soaking bot, but post 10 you really just want to get as much structure damage as possible, and they shouldn't be split. Plus they have a Talontier advantage, so they actually want to force a fight. And you want to force a fight when you're up Talontiers as 5. You don't want to do it as 4. So they ended up getting a kill on the Turon. And here, think about it. If this building had been like... If someone had pinged retreat... If someone had pinged retreat before the building died and they'd all backed up to here, the Immortal would still be dead, they would have lost a couple shots from the tower, and Tyrael and Tehran would both be alive. That's just like a fundamental thing about playing. It applies to web weavers, it applies to punishers on Infernal Shrines, and it applies to BoE. Like, if you're about to lose the building, just back up. Because as soon as the building's gone, you know the enemy team's going to force a fight. Like, you know what's going to happen. Don't give the enemy team an opportunity to do the right thing. So if Yujin selected his level 16 talent, he wouldn't have had to burn Sank there. Fun fact. Because he could have just stolen the camp and then left. Yes! Awesome. And when the building dies, the line moves. That is actually a perfect way of saying it, and I wish I'd thought of it.
Before my wrath, demon.
Alright, so once again, they're chasing the Li Ming. If the Lunaro had Thornwood Vines and was focusing, they could just poke. But instead they're chasing the Li Ming. They're going to win the first half of the race just because of the zoning. Lunara's going to die again. Did Lunara take Greater Spell Shield? Lunara did not take Greater Spell Shield versus Double Mage. Alright. The possible exception of Muradin. And I say the possible exception of Muradin, not the guaranteed exception of Muradin. With the possible exception of Muradin, if you're against two mages, the mages are Kerrigan, Chromie, Magestad, Asmodan, Kel'Thas, Jaina, and Li Ming. Those are the 7 mage-esque heroes in the game. If you're against any two of those heroes, and you're not Muradin, you need to take Spell Shield at 13 if Spell Shield is an option for your class. Lunara has a special version of Spell Shield called Greater Spell Shield, which is an amazing version of Spell Shield. Tychus actually has a really good one, too, called Neo Steel Plating. I think that's the stuff still might be better because it's Muradin, because he's up against Muradin and Johanna. So I actually agree with that pick. Because it's still self-sustained, it's a defensive talent. If Lunara had taken Greater Spell Shield, I think 2 of her deaths wouldn't have happened. So 2 of her 6 deaths would not have happened, and she'd be alive right now. Of course, if Lunara hadn't taken Leaping Strike, 2 of her other deaths wouldn't have happened either. So she'd be at 2 deaths instead of 6. It's kind of a big difference. So Lunara took 2 bad talents. The team, as a rule, made a bad decision in choosing to force fights rather than race. And letting the tank soak was a bad decision by the entire team. Those were the 3 major, issues with this game. And this is despite the fact that they won the draft. This is why some people say the draft doesn't matter. A lot of people think, for some reason, that the draft doesn't matter. The draft matters an enormous amount. If 2 teams are even in MMR, and both teams play equally well, the team that won the draft will win the game. It's only if you're significantly better than your opponent and you outplay them that you can win despite having a bad draft. Why is the red team fighting instead of racing? I have no idea. It's only if you're better than your opponent that you can outplay them and win them with a worse draft. Now, a lot of people don't understand what constitutes a good draft, so a lot of people will think they have a shitty draft. And then they win the game and they're like, oh, I guess we outplayed them. In reality, they actually probably had a good draft and they didn't outplay, it's just that their draft was actually better. I've seen that happen a lot. One of the reasons that I'm working on the guides that I'm working on is because I need to I really want to make a really good drafting guide, but it involves a lot of articulating concepts that don't exist yet. Huge being a little bit salty. Tron was actually fine. If they just won the race, Tron would have been fine. And they had that option of winning the race. The game probably ends here because 20-16. Another note, 20-16. Remember what I said about soaking? If you soak correctly, you'll never be more than 2 levels behind. Assuming you leave once you've lost a fight. Levels behind. Okay.
Blue team is victorious.
So Lunara actually made the worst decisions of any player on that team. And also complained the most. Which confirms my belief. And confirms the study they did on Halo players, that the worst player is always the player who complains the most.